Hi everyone. Welcome to the follow-up video of NoCode AI Bootcamp, the hands-on workshop that we build for helping you use AI and no-code tools to build AI-powered applications. This is a follow-up video of the bootcamp because we were not able to finish the practical side of the bootcamp, which is actually building the application itself. And therefore, in this video, I'm going to show you how to build out the application using the tools that we discussed in the No-Code AI Bootcamp. Let's do a quick overview of what we discussed in the AI Bootcamp. Uh, One of the key items that we have to uh, respond to today is how the app infrastructure is built. We discussed that there is a front end to every application, there is a back end, and there are requests and responses that are done through APIs. So this is how an overall web application infrastructure sort of looks like. We also looked at OpenAI's API documentation, and we found out how OpenAI actually works, how we have to give context to every API call that we make to OpenAI to get a response from them. So the first API call looks like you are a helpful assistant. Can you help me learn the JavaScript? The first is the developer message, which configures the OpenAI bot, and then is the user message. And then comes the AI response. When we want to continue the conversation, we have to send OpenAI the conversation that we had before, along with the new message that we want to send them to get a response to that particular message. So let's take a look at the OpenAI API documentation, and then we'll go into our tools to start the implementation. I will also show you what we are going to build today in this video, so you have a better idea of what the final goal is. So here is the OpenAI API documentation. Before we dive into it, let me show you what is the final application going to look like. This is dashboard for an application that I built. I'm going to go into the sign up page, and I can create a new account here. I will give it a name. I will choose any random email address, and I will have a password, a fairly simple one, and I'm going to click sign up. And this is where I land after I can talk to OpenAI using this uh, form that I have on this application. Hi, OpenAI, what can you help me with? We have a loading button that shows that something is happening, and then we get the response from the assistant. Hello, I'm here to help you with a wide range of topics, whether you have questions about general knowledge, need help with educational subjects, want to discuss technology, or require assistance with writing and editing. I'm here to assist you. Just let me know what you are interested in or need help with. Now I will send another message to OpenAI saying, I would like to learn how to use Zano. And now OpenAI will respond to me with what it can offer me in terms of learning Xano. I would like to learn how to use Xano. This was my message. Along with the context from before, went on to OpenAI, and the assistant gave me the response. Xano is a powerful no-code backend development platform that allows you all of the details that how Xano works basically. Perfect. So we are going to build out this application using no-code tools. And in the application that we are going to build, we can also make the UI a bit better than how it looks right now over here. So let's go into the API documentations of OpenAI and see how does the chat completion, the particular format of talking to OpenAI that we are using today, is going to work. We can see here that this is a curl request, which is supported by Xano. Curl is the um, type of APIs that are supported by Xano, so we are going to use that. You will see that there is a array of objects here till here that we have to send to OpenAI along with our OpenAI API key in order to get a response from OpenAI. The response that comes from OpenAI looks something like this, and here is the answer that OpenAI gave us. So this is what we are going to build using Xano. Just remember, when we are going to continue the conversation, we need to give the complete context again to OpenAI to get the next response that we want from OpenAI. Perfect. So as you've seen the application here, we have a backend database here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this complete workspace, and we are going to start from scratch. I'm going to delete this workspace altogether and we are going to start building the complete backend again. Here, I'm going to click on create new workspace. I'm creating an app, continue. I'm going to start from scratch without the help of AI, and I'm going to choose BWeb as the front end that I'm going to be building this with. Please make sure that you set up user authentication here. Otherwise, setting up user authentication can get a little bit more complex. But Zano already gives us a head start with user authentication by giving us the user authentication table and the APIs for it. When I click on create workspace, it creates my workspace. And now we have database table of user over here. Inside the user data table, we can see there are columns, name, email, password. These are the items that people submit when they're signing up on our platform. The second database table that we would need now is our conversations with OpenAI. Let's call it messages. We do not want to create CRUD API endpoints by itself, but we'll create them manually. Here, the first item that I want to add is because we want to make sure that every message is attached to a user. Therefore, we want to give a user ID as a parameter that this data table gets connected to the other database table. Here, if I click on table relationships, because I added the username here in messages, user ID here, now this data table is connected to this data table. This is the relationship between our different database tables, which can be observed by clicking this button, show table relationship. Perfect. Now that we have the messages table here, we've connected it to the user table. Let's add index, which is what is the number of the message that this is what is the number of the message, what is the sequence of this message, was it the first message or was it the second message? Then we are going to give a role. Is it a developer message, is it a user message, or is it an assistant message? And then we are also going to give the message content itself. So let's call it content instead of message. Perfect. So now we have these endpoints here. We also want to already make a user here in our table. I'm going to make a dummy user here, and I'm going to give it a random 12345 password. Perfect. Now that we are here, I can see that there is a user over here, and we have the database table here. You will notice that now I can just select the user directly from here. We don't want to select it directly. We don't want to create the table records by ourselves, but we want to use APIs to create these entries into our tables here. So let's go into API, and as you can see in API, the authentication APIs are already created. I'll explain you these APIs real quick. Login is how you log in into the application. Sign up is how you sign up. So this is a post that creates a new entry into the user table. This is what checks that the password is validated and the user exists, and only then gives an authentication token to our front end. And me is the user data, which is fetched from the user table and given to our front end so that we can display it in our front end altogether, like in my profile page, for example. Perfect. So now we have the authentication API folder here. Let's make an OpenAI, all the API calls that we're going to make to OpenAI as a database, as an API folder here as well. Once we have this folder, we can add an API endpoint, and we will use custom endpoint for this. We are going to call it first conversation. User authentication is enabled, so only authenticated users can make these API calls. Text, we will need the user ID, and we will need the user message because every message that goes has to be attached to a user ID. Now, in the function stack, we are able to first of all create an array like this, which will be called messages, because we don't want to just edit the message here every time, but we want to input this message from within our API, so it becomes easier for us to change this information with every API call, because this information is dynamic. With every new message, instead of hello, you'll be giving the user message. developer message also you can change to whatever you want it to be, however you want to configure your OpenAI bot. So let's get back to Xano, and I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it messages. By default, it goes to expression in Xano, but we are not going to use expression today. So we are going to change type so that it becomes a normal text value over here. Instead of the text value, we want to send an array. We will create an array here, and now we have an array called messages. The next is we want to create an object within the array. This is called an object. When this curly brackets start, this is called an object. It stores a set of values inside. Array stores a list of objects or a list of just variables or any sort of list inside. And array can store any type of list basically. So let's go back into Xano and create a variable. We are going to call it a developer prompt, and let's make change type, and let's make an object. You can directly select the object from here as well, or you can make an object by just putting the curly brackets as I did. What we want to do is we are creating an object which is the developer message, which is this particular object. So we want to set the role as developer. Xano makes it very simple. By clicking set, we can set the role to be developer right over here. Update. Next, we want to set the content as you are a helpful assistant inside the same object as well. So let's go here again, click on set, and we are going to set the content as you are a helpful assistant. Perfect. Now we have a developer prompt. We want to add it to our variable over here. So in order to add it to a variable, we can just use add to beginning of an array or end of an array, however you want to do it. It's an empty array right now, so we can do end of array as well. It will add the item as the first item of the array. So the existing array is messages, the existing variable where we want to add values, and this first item that we are adding is developer prompt. This is where we created the developer prompt. Now we are going to save this. Now we have the developer prompt added to the array. Let's see how the response looks like. Messages, right? This is what we want to see. Here I'm going to select the auth token, user ID 1, user message, hello, how are you? Run. Oh, look, we are already creating a structure inside this messages array for role and content. But you see that the second part of this is missing, which is the role. That second object in this is missing, which is the role user and the content that needs to go with it. So let's set that as well. I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call this variable user prompt. And instead of expression, I'll change it to value, text value. I'll select object and I will set the object role as user. And I'm going to set the content as user message. User message is an input. So here we can go into the input section and you can see the input that you have for this API call over here is here, and I can choose this. Perfect. User message, user prompt is set up as well, but we need to add it to the messages array. So let's add to end of array. Which array is it? It's messages. What do we want to add to it? User prompt. Perfect. Now that we save this, let's run this again to see what happened. So now we have a complete array of messages for our first API call. You will see that looks exactly like this, right? This starts with brackets and then there are curly brackets inside with all of this content. Let's go back here. You will see we are starting the array and then we have two objects inside this array. One says developer, you are a helpful assistant, and the user says, hello, how are you? Perfect. Now we have the messages configured inside our Xano API call. What we want to do is we want to start doing the external API call. This is the external API call. I'm going to copy this whole item over here. I'm going to use the import curl feature in Xano, which lets me import the complete API curl request very easily into Xano. I'm going to paste it here and click on import. You will see that all of this API call that I copied got put into different brackets or whatever different elements. URL is this one. So Zano recognized this is the URL. The method we are using post, and it doesn't mention, but usually it picks it up if it's a post request. Parameters, we have model for O. You can see model for O is one of the parameters in -d, which stands for data, and -h stands for headers. And you can see the headers down here as well. Content type, application JSON, and H authorization bearer over here. Perfect. Let's see if this runs. We want the response not to be messages now. We want the response to be API1. Oh, wait, we haven't set anything up yet. We haven't even given the API key to OpenAI, and we haven't even given our messages array to OpenAI. So let's set that up first, because you see here we got the response. The response is a success, but it says you didn't provide an API key. So invalid request error came. So what I want to do is I want to remove all of these items here, and instead of giving an array here, we want to give our array messages here. So I'm going to delete all of these messages that are already configured inside this array, and this value, I'm going to change it to messages. This is the array that we created, and I was showing you that we ended up structuring our messages array over here. Perfect. Now I'm going to save this. We still haven't given the OpenAI API key. So I'm going to get an API key real quick from my OpenAI dashboard, create a new secret key, bootcamp test key 2. And I copied my API key. I'm going to go into settings and I'm going to save this as an environmental variable so that I can use it again and again, because API key once displayed will not be visible again and again. So please make sure that you're saving it here. And it's very secretive information, because if somebody leaks my API key or I end up leaking my API key, you can just keep charging my account on OpenAI all you want by making requests to this OpenAI API key. So I have to keep it as a secret. That's why I save it in environment variables. I can go back inside here in my OpenAI or the first conversation API that I'm building. And this API request, I need to transform it now so that I can provide the API key. Again, this is taken as an expression by default. We are going to change the type of it. I'm going to select this text because this is the text that needs to be replaced with the actual API key. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to add a filter to replace this particular text string to the environment variable, which is stored in the env over here, to OpenAI, and I will update it. Perfect. So now, as you can see, I'm sending the messages in an array from here. I have already given my OpenAI API key, so this should do the job. So let's see. We have the user ID 1. Hello, how are you? Is the message we want to send. I'm going to run this and see what response we get. Perfect. So here's the response we got for this OpenAI API call that we made. And when we scroll down, you will see that the content, so I'm just a computer program, so I don't have feelings, but I'm here and ready to help you. How can I assist you today? Congratulations, you just made your first API call to OpenAI. I'm going to copy this result because we don't want all of the rest of the information. We only want this information because only this information is essential to us. So I'm going to click add a function. I'm going to create a variable and store this inside a variable. So this will be assistant message. Let's not use expressions again. I'm going to change the type of it. There is a very easy way to go to this content. Otherwise, you have to use dot notation. Please Google what an array is, what an object is, and how you point to different elements in an object or in an array, because this will give you more clarity how Xano is making our life easier by giving us those tools at our fingertips in a user interface. So if you see here, the API request that we made returned API1. So this whole message is stored in API1. So I'm going to put API1 here, and I'm going to use this function, this helper called subpath. When I go into subpath, I can paste the complete value of API1. API1 is storing this value. I pasted it inside and I'm going to click define. When I click define, it already put everything in the appropriate columns basically. And I'm going to choose here where my response is from OpenAI content. When I choose content, I have the response here. So this is how dot notation works. Inside API1, I want to go into response. So it went inside response. It went inside result. Inside the response, it went inside choices. It went inside choices to the first item in this array with the index 0, and inside the message, the content. So this is how dot notation works to reach particular elements inside an object or inside an array. Perfect. I'm going to save this over here, the assistant message. Instead of API1, I just want to display the assistant message now. So I changed my response to assistant message. Now let's run it again. And you see, I only get the response that I received from this particular API basically. Perfect. So now that we are running this pretty smooth and we have results from the OpenAI API, we want to add the items that we receive from OpenAI over here in the table. So we have a database of the conversation that a user is having with our chatbot. So I'm going to add a function to add a record to the messages table. What do we want to add first? We want to add the developer message. So user ID is 0. No, the user ID is the user ID that came inside the input. So I'm going to change that to user ID in the input. We can also select this by going into input and selecting user ID. Index. The developer message, I like to put developer message always as index 0. So I can filter it out later. You will see why I'm doing that. So the first item that we want is the developer role. And the content that goes inside developer role, let's go back inside this variable that we created. You are a helpful assistant. I'm going to copy this and here, keep editing, save. I'm going to add this as the content over here, save. But this is not the only one because we want to add the user message and the assistant message as well to the table. So we're going to add a record, which is again user ID. Now I want to call it index 1. Role is user and the content is inside the input here, user variable, a user message. So I'm going to go into input and select user message. Perfect. I can save this now. I also need to add the message from OpenAI here. User ID, again, user ID, index 1, because this is the first part of the conversation. The role is assistant in this case. And the content, we have it in assistant message over here because this is where the variable where we stored the assistant message. Perfect. Now that I save this, I can run this now and we should have all of these records getting created in our database table for messages. Run. Perfect. Now that it has been created, I can go inside my database and check this as well. We have all of the information that we need. But if I'm doing if I'm doing a second part of the conversation, this won't be apt because it will still add the next message as index 1, which will confuse us in terms of analyzing what is the next message, where is the which one was asked first, which one was asked next. So let's create another API call to handle this particular issue. We are going to call it continue conversation. Again, we want to keep the authentication as enabled. And here again, we have the user ID and we have the user message. As we discussed, we want to send the information of the previous talks that happened with the OpenAI bot. Let's make a messages string, a messages array, which contains all of the information from the past that happened with this particular user and our OpenAI chatbot. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all query all records here you can find this right here as well. Database request, query all records inside the messages which have a user ID, messages dot user ID, because we are inside the messages table and the user ID is given in the messages table, is equal to the input user ID. When I do this, I can see that if the user ID is 1, these are all the messages that happened. These are all the conversations that happened with this particular user for this particular, yeah, basically for this particular user. Now you will see that we have index 1, but we want to change the index into 2. So there is a smart way to do that, because it doesn't have to just change to 2, but it has to change to 3, it has to change to 4, 5, it will keep on increasing. But you won't be making more and more API calls based on the index. So you want to change the index dynamically the more times the API call runs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. We'll call it new index. Instead of expressions, again, we will change the type here. And what we are going to do is go into messages. We're going to get the last item from the messages. So we'll add a filter. This is an array filter called last. It already exists in Xano, so no worries there. We want to get the index of the last item, and we want to add, we added a filter, we want to add 1 to that index. Update. So after doing all of this, I'm going to save this, and let's see what the new index for this conversation would be. Run again. 2. So this is the new index. But if the last message had the index 2, then it would be 3. If the last message had the index 3, it would become 4. So we have the new index now. Amazing. How do we go ahead and build a new messages array altogether? Let's, first of all, the first part is making an array, messages array. Let's call it that. And we want an array. This is the symbol of array. Let's change the type again and constant. We can select an array from here as well. You will see array already gets displayed here. We have this array now, but we want to go through each message inside this list, because as you see, messages 1 is a list of objects. So there is a function called loop. Loop basically goes through individual items and takes actions and does whatever we want it to do. So this is these are the items that we want to loop through. For each loop on the messages 1 array that we have an item for each loop, that each object is called an item. So what do we want with this item? The first thing is we want to create a variable, because what we are going to do inside this is API reference. Again, we want to create these objects and put them inside the array. So first we create a variable. It will be called item message. Instead of expression, we need to change it to an object where we will set the role as item.role. Item role, I'll explain you that. One particular object is called an item, and inside the item, item.role is developer, or item.role is user. And when it's looping through the third item here, the role will become assistant. Similarly, we want to set the content as item.content. Update, and we will save this. So we have the item message here. We also want to add it to the array that we have here. Add to array. Add to the end of the array. The existing variable is messages array that we created, and we want to add the item message to it. Item message is here. You see this returned as item message. So we are going to save this. Now we can check the messages array and see how it looks. Boom, we have an array of the role developer, role user, role assistant. Perfect. But we forgot the new message from this user that is going to be added here to complete the API call. The last message has to be from the user so the assistant can respond to the message of the user. So let's create outside this for each loop, we'll create a variable called the user message object. You can name it however you want, but names cannot be similar, otherwise it will get confusing. I'm going to set the role for this one as user and the content for this one as the user message in the input. Input user message, update, save, and I'm going to add this to the end of the array. Which array? Messages array. What do I want to add? User message object. Perfect. Now I'm going to run this again and you will see the user message gets added here as well. Oh, we haven't given any user message. So let's run it again. This is the second part of the conversation. Run again, and you will see the user message got added here as well. So we've made this array now similar to the array over here, but we've added more context in this so that conversation can continue. Okay, so the next step is we add the external API request, copy this, import curl, add this, delete all of the messages which are pre-configured because we are going to replace it with our messages array here. Hmm? And we want to change the OpenAI API key. How do we do that? We first change the type of it because it was an expression. I'll copy this, add a filter, replace this text to the environment variable OpenAI API. Save. Perfect. Now let's see if I can get a response from OpenAI for my next message. Let's give it a better response. Tell me how can I learn Java? 2 sentences. Okay, I'm going to run this and we'll get a response from OpenAI. Here is the response that we got from OpenAI. Start by understanding the basic concept of Java programming, such as syntax, object-oriented principles, and standard libraries, the thorough knowledge, blah, blah, blah. Let's copy this whole thing because as you know, the next steps, we need to add these to our messages table so the next API call can work with all of the context that it gets from the past conversation. First, we need a variable to get the assistant message here. Instead of expression, we are going to use the simple text. We are going to choose API1, subpath, copy paste the whole thing from here, and I'm going to select content. Now we have the content from the assistant message. Now we need to add the records to our data table. We click on add messages, user ID is given in the input. Index, we created a new index, remember, which will be 2 in this case, but it could be anything because these APIs will keep on running. It can become 100 as well. Role, what would be the user role here? It could be, this is user, let's add the user message first. And user message, we know the text user message, user has given us the user message in the input already. Save. We need to also add the response from OpenAI. So let's add another record. We call it user ID. Index new index, role is assistant in this time, and the content, we save the assistant response in assistant message variable. Perfect. Now we save this, and I can run this again, and you will see that this got added to the messages table as the second index. User asked, tell me how I can learn Java in 2 sentences, and the OpenAI responded with this. Perfect. So to make life easier, let's also cover the topic of functions. Functions is basically converting an API call into a reusable format so we can use it into other API calls as well. So as I said, an API call is a it can be bundles of different APIs together as well. It can be just one simple function within it, like query all records is a function, create variable is a function. All of these are functions basically. So I'm going to publish this first and then go into this three dot option on the right hand side and click on convert to function. The function name is continue conversation. You can change it to whatever you want. Let's just publish it again. First conversation, I want to change this as into a function as well. I will click convert to function, first conversation, and a function has been created. I can go into the library of my functions and I can see these two functions have been created. I can see where they are being used, one API endpoint, one API endpoint, when it was created, when it was published. So I can reuse these functions now. So when a user comes onto our platform, they start a chat. How do we know that they haven't had any past conversations with us and we should use first conversation as the starting point? Or they've had a conversation in the past and we should use continue conversation. Let's make an API call for it and we will be able to cover if then conditional statements. Basically, we are going to see if, hey, does a conversation exist or a conversation doesn't exist? And based on that, we can call two different functions. We can call it complete bot. User authentication is required as always. User ID, and we get user message from the user. These are the two items that we receive from the user. What we want to do is database request, query all records in the messages where the message user ID is equal to the input user ID. Perfect. So let's do it for user ID 1. Okay. I have a lot of a lot of messages already that I've communicated with OpenAI. Let's reset this and check it for user ID. User ID 2 is empty. It's 0 here. So let's make a conditional statement for it. To make a conditional statement, you just search conditional here and you will see if then statement data manipulation. Click on data manipulation and now we have to add the condition. The condition is if messages 1, this messages 1 over here, the query all records, is equal to null, which means it's empty. We save it. If it's equal to null, then we are going to run a function, custom function, which is first conversation. User ID will be the input user ID, input text will be user message. If it is not, else, basically, we are going to run the other function, continue conversation. Again, user ID, user message. Perfect. So now we have a complete bot API call that we can just push onto, we can run from our front end, and it already manages like, hey, does this user have a past conversation or does this user want to continue the conversation? All of this gets managed here. Let's also make an API call to list all of the messages of a user. Listing APIs, I call it, and I will add a custom endpoint which will list all messages. Authentication is required for this. Text user ID is required so that all of the records in messages with user ID is equal to the input user ID gets displayed if I put user ID 1, which is me, the sample user I created, I have all of the conversation with user ID 1 that has happened with this bot. You can see index is 0 for the developer message, index is 1 for the user message, the first message, the assistant's first message, the second user message, the second assistant message. Total 6 entries here. Perfect. So that's all the API calls that we need. I'm going to publish this one as well. And now let's connect our Xano to our VWeb. I'm going to create a completely new project on VWeb as well, so we can go through the process all together from scratch. Let's go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to create a project, and I am going to use a template to get a head start. Let's use this template. Bootcamp AI chatbot. Let's go back. It opened up another project for me. This is the project that I was trying to create. Let's go back inside here. Here is the template that we have. The first thing we want to do is we want to add the authentication. So Xano auth is the first authentication we want to add. In order to add Xano authentication, I will go inside the plugins option in VWeb, go into authentication and click on Xano auth and add. Now it asks me for a metadata API key. I can get this from Xano. It also shows me where I can get it from. So I will go inside my Xano. I will go back to my workspace instances, click here, metadata API, manage access tokens, and I will create a new access token called Xano metadata API key. I copied this, and now you will see all of the options already start coming here from my Xano instance. The workspace name is Abhishek for me. The workspace that we are working on is Bootcamp get me endpoint, which is this endpoint. You will already see that it gives me those options. Auth me, login endpoint is login, sign up endpoint is sign up. Continue. It's working. Now our APIs are connected. These data sources and branching, you can leave it as is. We are not going to use those features. Those are more complex DevOps features. So now that I'm here, let's configure our Xano API with this particular page. This is a form container. When we are running a workflow, for example, we want to sign a user inside their account, we want to select the form container because the form container contains the username, the password, the login button all together. When I have chosen this, there is a feature called workflows inside Xano, which is on the right hand side corner in this icon, a thunder icon basically. I click on this and I will see already a login is created. I'm going to delete this. We are going to create this from scratch, so you can create your own login dashboards as well. You can modify this very easily inside Xano. I'm going to click on new. On submit, when somebody tries to submit this form, what I want to do is I want to log in the user. Login using the Xano icon. Let's do that again so you know exactly which one I'm talking about. Xano auth, because we added this plugin. Xano auth already started popping here. We are going to click on login. I'm going to name this as login as well to avoid confusion. Email. I'm going to click on this button over here. Let's unbind this first. So I can manually enter a value here, or I can click here. Do not enter the value manually because it will be static. We want to plug the information to a form field. The form field being email. You will find this in this X column of VWeb. Email I selected. Next, I also need to configure the password. The password is in the password column. Perfect. So now once the login is done, I want to navigate the user to the next page after their login is completed. I will just navigate them to list of items page, which comes with the template. Perfect. So now login should start working. I hope I remember the password that I kept for my account. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Login. Now, login is done. Now I can go inside the application. Let's configure the sign up page as well so we can create new accounts on this application. I will select this whole form, delete this already existing sign up workflow and create a sign up workflow from scratch. When somebody submits the form, I want to sign them up using the Zano auth. I will call this sign up. The name in the form, whenever somebody fills out the name, comes out as name, the email, and the password. And once a user is signed in, we want to navigate them to the list of items page as well. Perfect. Let's try this again. I'm going to create a new account with a different email address, but the same password. It doesn't matter. Any password that I want. Sign up. Look, I'm signed up, and this sign up should have gotten recorded in my user table as well. And here it is. I have a new sign up on my application from bsingla280@gmail.com. Password we cannot see because this is confidential information. You do not get access to the client's account as well. So now that we are here, let's also quickly look at how the requests here work like. So when I am trying to log in, you can see all of the information that I'm inputting inside the email field and all of the information that I'm inputting inside the password field. And when I click on login, you will see what happened. Setting value for access token. This is my access token that got generated. And then the value for the user got accepted. ID1 created at this, name, email. Setting value for is authenticated as true, succeeded, and then it navigated me to this particular page. Let's clear this. The same for sign up. We will see a little different items. I'm going to give another email address to sign up again. And I will click sign up. And here we can see action sign up, setting value for access token, setting value for user, authentication is true, succeeded, and then I move forward. Now let's see how we can modify this page on VWeb to cater to our application's needs. So here on the left hand side, you can go into layout and see all of the items, all of the different sections that this page has. It has the navigation section over here. When I click on it, it selects the navigation section. And then here it selects all of the next things. To order to change the navigation section, I'll click here and I will change this as chatbot. And I do not need the other links, so I can just select and delete them. Perfect. So my application only has the chatbot section. I will delete all of the rest of the items. I do not need them as well because I'm going to create the chatbot from scratch here. So the first structural part of a web page is a sections. I will add a section and I can give it a width, a height on the right hand side in the edit section. Once I have selected the section and I'm inside it, I can give a width and height to it. I'm going to give it a fixed height of 800 pixels. Perfect. I'm also going to give it a background color. Here, there's a color option inside background. I'm going to give it a background color a little darker than the rest of the page so that I can differentiate this particular element on the page. Now that I have this, I can go inside, add a container which will store our content. I'm going to align this container to be the center and justify it to be the center as well. Basically center from left and right and center from top to bottom as well. So now that I have this container, first thing I should drop a form inside it where I will record users' messages when they want to interact with OpenAI. Let's change this form. I do not need this name input. I only need one input, which is message. So I'm going to change this form input to a message. Field name, I'm going to change it to message. Placeholder, your message. You see it now says your message because the placeholder has been changed, and I'm going to select this as message as well. Now we have this. What I want to do is I want to also display all of the messages that have happened with a particular person. So I'm going to put a list here because messages is a list of all the messages that happened. You see everything went to the left. Let's go into layout and fix this. Fix this. So we have the flex box here. You can see we have the complete section here, one flex box here, one flex box here. So this is the flex box that needs to go inside here so that it follows the structure of this flex box. So I'm going to drop it right here. You see it came right on top of it. What we want to do is we want to separate it out with the form by some extent so that they can be separated. We can use a margin. I'm going to give it a margin of 20, let's say. So now you see this element has moved upwards and given more space for this particular. So there will always be a margin of 20 pixels between this and this. Perfect. You see this is a list of items: apple, banana, orange. We do not want to use this list. We want to actually use the list of all the messages that happened with a particular contact. In order to do that, we need to add a data source inside Sano. How do we do that? We go into plugins, we click on data sources, and now we can select Zano again. It will ask me for the metadata API key again. I already have it copied, so I can paste it here. Or you can create a new metadata API key from your Zano, as I showed you before. Workspace, Binode Camp, and I'm going to connect this. And now we can go into adding a collection. This collection is called messages. I can store it within a folder as well. Let's do that to keep our workspace clean so that we can understand it in the future as well. I'm going to go inside the messages folder and save messages inside the messages folder. The source of this data is from Zano, and we want it to be dynamically updated. I will go and click in create, and now we have to select where will this data come from. It will come from the listing API group, list all messages, and what would be the user ID. As you saw, we already authenticated the user, so we can go here. The Zano gives us direct access to the user ID over here. Inside this user column, you will open this object, user object, and you will be able to see the ID of this user ID 3. I will click this. Now the current value becomes user ID 3. Let's go back to our Zano and see user ID is 3 for this particular account, which is currently authenticated in our application. Perfect. Continue. No data fetched. Empty array, because this user hasn't talked to OpenAI at all. So that's why it's coming up as an empty array. Let's try to get some data to work with inside Sano. So let's do a login with another account, the one which has interacted with OpenAI. So we can fetch all of the data from that. So again, we go into messages, continue. This time the user ID has already become 1. And when I continue, my messages with OpenAI has reached here. I'm going to click continue again. And now all of these items are stored in the messages collection. What I want to do is, instead of displaying apple, banana, and orange, I want to display the messages that I fetch from my Zano database. So when I select this flex box, because this is a list flex box, I can change the items from apple, banana, and orange. You see items as an option here. I can click here. I can select all of these, remove this, and go into my collections here. And inside the collections, I have created the folder messages, and inside the messages is the array of data with all of the items inside this array. So I'm going to click data, And now you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 line items got created here. Inside each object, there is data that has been fetched for each message that happened with OpenAI. We don't want to display the developer message here. So let's click on filter and we will add a condition when the role is developer, role is not developer. Look, now it changed to 4 because the developer message got removed from here. But it is still saying object because it only created the number of items, but inside these items, we have to match individual items to what inside the object should it get the value from. So object, this one, let's say it gets value from the content. You see, because we are inside an item, it already fetched me the item data. If I go inside this item, it will fetch me the item data of this item, index 1 assistant. So I can select content here, but I need to delete the original item data. And now the item data content is here. Hello, how are you? Hello, I'm just a computer program, but I'm here to help you. How can I assist you today? Tell me how I can learn Java in 2 sentences. Then the assistant tells me, but I do not know which message is from who. So let's add another element to know which message comes from who. So I'm going to go and add a text item. I clicked here, add, and then I want to add text inside in each item. When I click it here, it gets added everywhere because these are items which are repeated based on how many objects are here. So this can be changed into the role, user, a user message, assistant message, user message, assistant message. Let's change this user into capital letters to start with capital letters, and I can select it over here. We should also give some spacing between the two because it looks sort of odd that they're so close to each other. I can give a spacing by giving a margin, let's say 5, or let's make it 10. I can also give a padding of 20, or let's say 5, and let's change this to not be stretched, but to be compact, because now user is just user. We can give it a background color by going into background color. I can just select the color from here, so I know who's messaging and what the message is. Perfect. We want to give it a particular height because otherwise our page will keep getting longer and longer. We want to give it a particular height and then have a scroll button so that people can scroll up and see the conversation. So I will click here, select the flex box altogether, and I will give it a height which is fixed to, let's say, 600 pixels. 600 pixels height. And if I scroll more down, in case of overflow, I want to give a scroll option. So when this messages start overflowing in this container, I'll have a scroll message, a scroll button to scroll through the rest of the items. Perfect. So now we have the items here. Let's connect this form to our API complete bot. I select the form container altogether. I go inside workflows, click on new. When somebody submits this, I want to request from Zano API request, and that's why it's called a request. I click on request, select an API group. I want to do an OpenAI API call to complete bot. User ID in this case would be the user's user ID. Perfect, I connected that. And user message will be the message in the form, which has an empty value right now. Perfect, so we have the user message here as well coming. So let's try this API out, and if it's working, hello, That seems difficult. Can you explain me Java in 100 words? Okay, it's configuring succeeded. Oh, but we forgot something. The value, the data has already been fetched from a data table messages. You see the third message is already here, but it wasn't here before when we fetched the data. So we have to refresh the data as well that came into our front end to the new data that came into the front end now. So let's click here again, and we will click on fetch collection. A collection, we are going to fetch that collection one more time with the right information. Which collection? Messages. Perfect. Let's refresh this, and it should already have the next message, by the way. But our previous message still appears here. Let's make some additional edits. So whenever this message gets sent, what I want to do is clear the variable value. Reset variable value. Which variable? The message variable. I reset its value. Perfect. Now let's refresh this again. Once I make the next API call, it will remove the value. That sounds like it. I would love to learn JavaScript. Can you tell me what should I do first? Oh, look, the message disappeared and the new message is here. It seems like your message is incomplete. Probably we did not match the message properly. Let's see. User message, user message. Let's test this out by already putting a value here. Hello, how are you? In request, you will see in the form, hello, how are you is the value. Perfect. Now we have attached the value of the request and user ID is attached as well. So everything should work fine now. Let's try it. Oh, but do you see what we did? We already reset the value. So this reset should come after the request has been made because it was sending an empty value because we reset the value before making the request. So great, we troubleshooted this error. So now let's try it again. Hello, how are you? Submit. And hello, I am here and ready to help you. How can I assist you today? What would be the first item in JavaScript that I should work on? When starting with JavaScript, the first item you should work on is understanding the basics of the language. Let's check the memory of open. My name is Abhishek. Okay. My name is Abhishek. Hello, Abhishek. It's nice to meet you. How can I assist you today? So if I ask now ChatGPT what my name is, it should be able to tell me Abhishek because I am basically going to send OpenAI all of these messages to get the next response along with my new message. What is my name? Your name is Abhishek. How can I assist you further? Look, now OpenAI has a memory and we have the scroll working here as well. Perfect. Did you also notice that we are not receiving any feedback when we click on submit button that something is processing? So let's add a loading icon as well here so that we know that something is loading in the application. So I will go here, add, I will search a loader element and I will add the loader element right below. This loader element needs to go through a conditional. When a workflow is ongoing, then it should display, and when a workflow is not ongoing, it should not display. So what I can do is I can create a data variable called loading and make its value as a boolean. Boolean is true or false. This boolean can only store two types of values, true or false. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this loader with a conditional rendering. It only renders or it only displays when this condition is true. What condition is true in this loader case? The loading condition has to be true. So I'm going to attach it to that. Right now the loading condition is false. Therefore, it's not visible. But I can force visible it on VWeb for dev purposes, but I'll keep it off for now. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my form container workflow again, and I'm going to change the variable value, change variable value. It's an option here. And I'm going to select the value of loading and make it true. And when I'm coming out of this workflow, when workflow has completed altogether, I'm going to change the variable value again to false. Now that loading button, loading a character is attached, is only visible when loading is true. And I set the loading true when we start doing the API call, and when we end the API call, I make it false again. So the loading button should appear again. In JavaScript, how is it different from Java? Look, now we have the loading button here, and the loading is happening, and I have the message from OpenAI. JavaScript and Java are both popular programming languages, but they are fundamentally different in terms of design and usage. Perfect. So all of the information ends up coming here. One thing that we also have to do is the logout functionality. Let's do the logout functionality as well. Instead of this being a sign up button, let's change it into a logout button. So when somebody clicks this button, let's change the text of this button first. Make it log out. When somebody clicks this button, we want a workflow to log out the user and navigate them to the sign in page. Basically saying you are logged out, sign in again. So I'm going to click this button and you will see I got signed out and sent back to my login page. This page, that list of items currently is visible for even logged out users. If I refresh this, it will go away because the user is not logged in. So here, what I can do is I can make this page private only for logged in users or authenticated users. Save. Now nobody can access this page if they are not authenticated. Although in authentication, we need to configure where the logged out users go. Page to redirect on unauthenticated access, login. Page to redirect on unauthorized access, login. Save. And now I'm already seeing an error here. So basically nobody can access that page now if they're not logged in once the application goes live. And here I can log in into any of the accounts that I created, or your users can log in into any of the accounts they created. No, I don't think this was the password. This was the right password. Now I'm here. Hello, how are you? Oh, wait, this user already has had conversations, so the app is not complete yet. Let's fix the items to complete the app. When a user logs in, we navigate them to list of items, but we also want to fetch the collection so that their initial messages with OpenAI pop up as well. So let's try this again. Now, what I did was I added fetch collection messages here so that after the login, OpenAI fetches the messages that I've had with OpenAI. So therefore displaying me the messages that I've already had with OpenAI. Let's create a new account and see how it functions. Sign up. Oh, I have to change the page from here. Otherwise it takes me to the live app. I'll just give a random email address. I am here. Why is it still fetching the old? Let's add a workflow here as well. Trigger page workflows. When somebody lands on this page, we want to fetch the collection, messages collection. Let's go to the sign up page again and create a new account. And all of this data is coming into our database tables. I will show you that as well in a moment. Let's hide this. Now you will see this is empty. Hello, how are you? Hello, I'm just a computer program, so I don't have feelings, but I'm here and ready to help you with whatever you need. How can I assist you today? Let's go back into our database table and see. Okay, wow, we have had a lot of conversations with OpenAI now, with different accounts as well. Abhi at ZLab has had the maximum conversation. Perfect. So now we have a complete app built with the VWeb, Zano, and OpenAI. Please remember, this is not the only way to get a response from OpenAI. There are multiple ways to get a response from OpenAI. There are structured responses, so you can basically get a response in a particular format. For example, if you want to score somebody's questions and how they answered, you can get that in a structured format. Question one's score is this, questions two score is this, and therefore store that accordingly in your database table and also display that in the front end in whatever way you want. It can be, there are so many options here already. You can see that you can have a table, you can have a list, you can have an accordion, tabs, Kanban view, drop down. There are quite a few items here. So thank you for joining this workshop. Please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to help. You can leave your questions in the comment section, or if you're a part of our Slack group, please send us a message on Slack and I'm happy to help.